Hey everyone, it's Monday here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. We've got Noah Strackbein on. I want to talk to him ranking our top defensive tackles the Steelers should be looking at in the first round or shortly after if they want to trade back into the second. We'll talk about that, go over two true nose tackles versus pass rusher type defensive tackles. Are the Steelers actually looking at safety really hard in the draft? And this week's Mock Draft Monday winner, all here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things in the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find the show on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your Monday through Friday episodes as well as our bonus content. We thank you for making us your first listen every day because we're your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off on your first year. More on them later. As I said before, we're joined by the man himself, Noah Strackbein. He's back on the show. It's been a minute since we've had you here, Noah. You can find him at sportsillustrated.com, SI.com. He covers the Steelers. It's All Steelers Talk, that amazing podcast. Go check that out, the same places that you check our shows out. Noah, how you been, man?
I'm good, man. I'm good. I got to tell you that every single day somebody tells me that I have to talk faster to try and reach your expertise here. And this was the best one I've ever saw. I watch it all the time, and this was the best one by far. So I appreciate it. I'm happy to be back. I'm pumped to talk some Pittsburgh Steelers football as always.
People call me the Twister of podcasting because sometimes I will just keep going. But some people also like, Chris, I sometimes I think I'm in 1.5 speed, man. You need to slow down. And I'm just like, I apologize for those of us who I don't mean to talk like that. But sometimes your boy got to rip through it because we got a lot to talk about, just like we do on today's show. Noah, I want to talk to you about defensive tackle because that is a huge part of what the Steelers have been looking at in the early rounds of this draft class. What I'm going to do is we're going to go through our top 5 options at defensive tackle for the Pittsburgh Steelers. So we're excluding Mason Graham from the conversation, but I think it's interesting to compare and contrast the top guys and where we have them in this draft class here. Noah, you and I have been looking at these drafts over the years. I think this is a strong defensive tackle class. What is your outlook on the class as a whole before we start ranking these guys as if this is the year to go after one in the first round?
Yeah, I feel like this is outside of running back maybe, and I think there's an argument to be made between the two. It's the strongest position in the NFL draft. There are guys in the first 3 or 4 rounds that are possibly day one starters on any team. And in the first round, maybe the first 2 rounds, there are probably 6, 7, maybe 8 guys that can go who could all start day one and be impact players with future stardom on their resume. That's what you're looking at in this draft class. I think it's super deep. It's got a lot of guys that are versatile. And when you look at the front of it, I mean, all the way through, there's good talent, but the front of it, those first 2 or 3 rounds, it's loaded. It might be the best position in the draft.
Absolutely. I think this is a year to strike on it. I think it's why the Steelers have looked hard at it. And let's go through our top 5 here. Yeah, we're going to exclude Mason Graham from this, but this is just you and I going over our rankings and explaining why we have guys in certain spots in there so that people can understand the full gamut of who's available. My number 1 defensive tackle, excluding Mason Graham, is Mason Graham's teammate, Kenneth Grant. If you've been a fan of this show, you know that I've been ringing the bell about this guy for months. I love Kenneth Grant's tape. I love his size. I love his athleticism. There's so many parts of his game. I think the biggest thing he has to develop is more of a pass rush, but I think that there are elements that are good enough in his pass rush when in his ability to win one-on-one, that if he continues to develop naturally, I don't think it would be a stretch to imagine he could become an elite pass rusher, because I do think he will be an elite run stuffer / double team eater. And I think that is a big need for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Noah, is Kenneth Grant your top guy, or do you have someone else in mind?
No, it is Kenneth Grant. I mean, that guy is, if he was a stronger pass rusher right off the bat, I think there'd be an argument to be made between him and Mason Graham. It's still lean Mason Graham, but they would both be considered top 10, top 12 picks in this year's draft. I mean, Kenneth Grant is a guy that you could plug him day one as a nose tackle or 3-tech and not have to worry about him at all. And if you're looking for a guy like the Pittsburgh Steelers are, who's going to come in here and help them solve their run defense, which everybody could talk pass rush all day long. You got Cam Hayward, Keanu Benton, TJ Watt, even Alex Highsmith and Nick Herbig. You're pretty okay in that area of defense. What the Steelers have struggled with is stopping guys who build momentum on the ground. And that's who Kenneth Grant comes in here and becomes immediately. Like, he's the guy that comes in here, helps fix the run defense, replaces Larry Ogunjobi or, maybe Keanu Benton, wherever you play him, and adds an element to the defensive front that they have not had, since Tyson Alualu. And Tyson Alualu was not a run stuffer. He just was good at it when he was out there. But since then, maybe since Javon Hargraves, and that's what they're missing. And I think that you can't beat that in this defensive tackle class.
I agree. I think that he's that guy. I'll let you take the floor for your number 2 defensive tackle. Who's your second guy right behind him?
Yeah, the second guy, I want to say, comes with a little bit of an asterisk, because the fact that he did nothing at the NFL Combine or his pro day, I think, has a lot of teams and myself a little nervous about him at a first round, and really a guy that I think at one point was a top 15 pick in this draft. I still think he probably ends up there, maybe 21 if he falls that far, but I think he would have been a little bit higher and definitely over Kenneth Grant in a lot of teams' eyes if he put on a show, but we didn't see it. That's Walter Nolen. This dude is able to do it all. He's a self-proclaimed next Aaron Donald, which again makes me a little bit nervous. But that's a high bar, sir. A high bar to set for yourself, real high. But he's got all the talent. He's a tremendous pass rusher already. He's got the size. He could play run defense. I think he fits perfectly. He's less of a nose tackle than he would be a 3 tech, but I do think he's got all the upside. I think that's the one thing you might have over Kenneth Grant is just today where you sit here. I think Walter Nolen is a guy that could turn into, really any superstar defensive tackle that's in the league right now. He's got the upside to become. I think Kenneth Grant does more for what the Steelers do, but I think Walter Nolen, talent-wise, is really hard to beat in this draft.
So I'm with you on his talent and his raw athleticism. I think if again at the combine, it's just disappointing he hasn't been able to show it, because that would have changed things. But that's part of the reason I don't have him as my number 2. I have him as my number 3. I have Derrick Harmon as my number 2.
Yeah,
and part of it is when talking to Derrick Harmon at the combine, when getting to hear from him, even though it took 3 hours to hear from him, that was a long medical wait.
That's a classic. That's a classic Pittsburgh Steeler right there. If you got to wait,
and that's the other thing. Zach Frazier took 3 hours last year, so well, that means the Steelers are probably picking this guy because he made me. I had to wait 3 hours to get him, but we got him. But I like Derrick Harmon because he tests well enough. He has the size that you want, and I love his football IQ. Whenever I talk to him, and like the way he talks about the game, and the manner in which he's like, Walter Nolen's he's the next Aaron Donald. What Derrick Harmon says, I study Chris Jones and Cam Hayward because I know those are the type of guys I have to be like. I appreciate his approach more, and I feel like he's going to fit the bill more. That's why I have him as my number 2, and Walter Nolen is my number 3. Is Derrick Harmon your number 3? Do you have someone else in mind?
No, it is Derrick Harmon. I think they could switch out. Like that top 3 is. I think there's a little bit of a gap when you go to 4, but those top 3, that Kenneth Grant, Derrick Harmon or Walter Nolen, wherever you place them, they all have that upside to be a guy that comes in here and has all the physical traits that you're looking for, has put the productivity on the field in college, like just a guy that you feel comfortable putting out there immediately and saying, this guy's going to start high and grow higher. And that's what Derrick Harmon has. I agree with you. I was very impressed with Derrick Harmon at the NFL Combine. I think he is a sleeper in this draft that people are overlooking because he went to Oregon, who is not real known for their crazy defensive tackles, even though they've got a couple, and they're pretty good. But I still think when you think Oregon football, you think speed and athleticism and all that stuff, and the big guys kind of get lost in there. But if he was at Michigan, he'd be right in that conversation of a top 10 pick. I believe he's got everything you're looking for. I agree. I'm a big Derrick Harmon guy. I think those 3 are like the 1, 2, and 3. Like I said, they're right there. And then there's, I think, a gap in 4.
Now, I do think there's a gap between these guys and 4. We'll go through this quicker because we need to get to the next segment. My 4 and 5 are Darius Alexander out of Toledo, and then Tyleik Williams out of Ohio State. And I know some people think TJ Sanders is up there. I love Tyleik Williams' run defense tape. I love the way that he plays physical up the middle. I think that could be what contributes to him. I think he, even more so than like a Kenneth Grant, I think he has to prove more as a pass rusher. Yeah. But the run stuffing capabilities that if you brought this guy in, just say, hey, your job is to eat the center and the guard on either side of the play, wherever we're going, make sure that they don't get off the ball and keep the guys free. I think that would be extremely valuable. I think TJ Sanders out of South Carolina would be good, but I like his measurables, and I like Darius Alexander's athleticism overall. I saw him when he played Pitt this year, and not just having a pick 6, but also just a lot of other things he does well. They're my 4 and my 5. Who are your 4 and 5 at DT this year?
Yeah, it is Darius Alexander at 4. I think that's the easy one. He is the guy that, he's right there, and I think that if he maybe was a little bit younger and a little bit more athletic, he is super athletic, but he's a little smaller, and you're kind of basing it off of, and you don't know what's going to happen when you put on size. I think there's a question mark there. TJ Sanders is my number 5, but I like that's an interesting way to go, because I agree with you. I think Sanders has it all. I think there are question marks, across the board on all these guys, on whether or not they're elite pass rushers or run stuffers. And I think that's what you're looking for, or what you're targeting in on to kind of pick flaws from them. I think Darius Alexander is the easy 4, though. That guy's a guy that in another draft, a less loaded draft, I think he's in contention for a first-round pick.
I think that would be, it would be interesting to see what he did in such a draft. We got to talk about another position the Steelers might be zooming in on, and that could be safety. We'll talk about why that is, people think that, and whether or not it's worth it in this year's draft class, all here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm Chris Carter. He's Noah Strackbein. Stick with us. We'll be right back. But first, I want to remind you this show is also brought to you by TurboTax. Taxes was waiting and wondering if you were going to get you any money back, and then waiting and wondering and worrying some more. Now Taxes is matching with a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today. An expert who gives your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return, while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on your day. An expert who will find you every deduction possible and file every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy. Also, you can get the most money back guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, no worries. Now, this is Taxes. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live full service. Real-time updates only in iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. We're back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, here with Noah Strackbein of All Steelers Talk. Go check out his show. Noah, let's talk about safety, because there's a rising interest, or at least concern, that the Steelers could be interested in the safety position a little bit more this year. But it also could just be the Steelers doing their due diligence, looking around at the talent in this draft class. Now, of course, part of this is the safety Nick Emmanwori was brought into the Steelers facility for an official draft visit. I think that turned a lot of heads, like, oh, wait a second. But I look at Nick Emmanwori. I know that some people think, he's out of South Carolina. I know a lot of people put Malaki Starks as the top safety in the draft class. I ranked Nick Emmanwori as my top safety when I did my Post-Gazette, my big board of the safety position for them, and particularly because he has the ball production, he has the tape to tackle, and he's 6'3" and runs a 4.38. Like, this guy is a freak of nature who produces. I get why people are looking at him. I'm not so surprised about this. But I also don't think that by the Steelers looking into him, it means that safety is necessarily a big target. Do you disagree there, Noah? Do you think that they're actually really looking at this being a first-round pick for real?
Yeah, I think it's hilarious that you said the concern of them possibly being, because that's what we came into. We came into the draft cycle, and that wasn't even on the list. There was no conversation. We tried to convince ourselves corner was on the list before safety or any other position. I've heard offensive line before safety at some points, and here we are. Look, you got to follow the tea leaves sometimes. And the Pittsburgh Steelers, they might be hiding that they have interest in Shedeur Sanders. They might be hiding that they have interest in a running back. They might be hiding that they have interest in a corner. They are not hiding any interest in safety, and I think you got to follow that. I look at it and say Deshaun Elliott's contract is up after the 2025 season. Minka's contract's up after the 2026 season. Juan Thornhill's only here for a year. You don't know if Minka's in. You got to think Minka's in the long-term plans of the Steelers, but you can't be 100% sure. And same with Deshaun Elliott. And if that's the case, they're looking young and saying, okay, we got Joey Porter Jr., we've got Corey Trice, maybe we've got Beanie Bishop, if that's how that's how they feel. Next is safety, and this is an easy place to go. I could also look at it and say the Steelers are aware that they picked 21st and that they're open to trading back. And if that's the case, they got to have options, and maybe Malaki Starks maybe Nick Emmanwori are names that make sense later in the first round or even at 21 if Kenneth Grant and Walter Nolen and Derrick Harmon and all these guys are off the board and they're just looking to pick somebody that's still, very good and can bring a bunch of talent.
Now, the thing is with safety is it can always be tricky because a lot of safeties, positions are starting to become nameless like they are in basketball sometimes in the secondary where they're just like there are still guys who are pure free safeties and pure strong safeties. There's guys who could flow, but a lot of guys now they train to be both positions and to be slot guys because you need guys to be flexible in today's NFL because you want to be able to disguise more. You need to be able to move guys around so like, hey, that's when Minkah Fitzpatrick's at his best, when you can't predict where he's going to line up and he can line up in different spots and trust that his corners on the outside are going to lock stuff down. So now you're picking in the middle part of the field and he can force you into tougher guessing games to create turnovers. Now, that's not saying that's exactly why Minkah Fitzpatrick's only had one interception in the last 2 years, but I do think that that's part of what the Steelers could be looking at here. And, you look at a guy like Xavier Watts out of Notre Dame. I like the idea of getting a ball production guy and a guy that could produce there. I think that there's potential there for him to become to be a guy there, but I just don't know if it's worth the first round pick. I think that this will be a situation where if they traded back in the first round, still got your Derrick Harmon, your D tackle or whoever your first round pick is this year, and then you got like a late second round pick, an early third round pick, and then one of these top guys, was sitting around. Then I'd be like, okay, I can kind of entertain this now because despite them signing, Eccles in free agency, despite Beanie Bishop and what I thought was a good rookie season for an undrafted guy this past year, I still think this team could use a premier slot coverage option man in their defense because again, like if Joey Porter Jr. works out at CB1 and either Darius Slayer, if they draft a guy high, works out at CB2, and then you have a good slot guy, then all of a sudden you start to get into be a really bad pick your poison part when you face this Steelers pass defense.
Yeah, I agree. And I could see that. I could definitely see that being with the Steelers. I could see that being their 21st pick because of that thought process, because they're looking at it going, it's been a long time since our secondary has been elite and we're on the verge of potentially making it elite. Why not just finish it off? Why not just go get another guy that we could plug and play? They could also be looking at it saying best talent, best guy available there, first, third round. I agree with you. I like the idea of versatility. I like the idea of having a guy that could come in here and year one maybe play in the slot and then year two move back to safety or vice versa and allow guys like Deshaun Elliott who could also play in the slot to move around. Minkah who could play everywhere to move around. You have Juan Thornhill even who could play everywhere, move around. Like if you have those pieces, those chess pieces, and especially in a Steelers defense that almost always uses a sub package, you're looking at it going, just put them out there and see what works. And I like that. I agree with you. I'd rather, a second, maybe a third round guy over a first round guy. But I also look at it and say that if you're going to get, like you said, a 6'3" monster freak of an athlete who's got great ball skills and runs a 4.3, I mean, you can't complain about it. You can't be like, oh, that was a bad pick. It's like that guy might be the best safety. Yeah, like he could be that guy that makes your defense takes it to the next level, and at that point you got to make an argument for it.
And to your point, if you wait till day two and you get one of these guys with that third round pick that you have or a different pick that you trade up or down for, Kevin Winston Jr. out of Penn State, I think is pretty solid. Lathan Ransom is another guy that's pretty solid. Andrew Makuba out of Texas, I think he needs to get to his tackling better, but his ball production skills and his ability to play deep in the secondary, those things would be really interesting to add to the Steelers defense. There's even other guys like Billy Bowman out of Oklahoma later. He's smaller, but like his speed could be really interesting to have and add to the secondary. It's those types of things that I think they could be looking at. And like I think you made the biggest point here, though. This could be just them kicking the tires, being like, hey, we got to be prepared for best player available, because what happens if Walter Nolen, Kenneth Grant, Derrick Harmon all go off the board before they pick, and then Egbuka and Burden and Golden, they're all gone, and then Johnson and Barron are gone. What if you just, there's times where you just get kind of, you're screwed. Like the guys that you had lined up. That's what happened to them in the Artie Burns draft. They really thought William Jackson was their guy. The Bengals went ahead and took him ahead of them, and it led to them kind of just being like, well, we still really want a corner, so we're going to go take this guy. You got to have a plan to move off of a position, even if you really need it. And I think that's what safety might be this year. Is it's not the position they're really looking at, but it's a backup, it's a fallback plan for, hey, if all these other positions of value go before us and we see this guy here, is this guy worth us taking in 21 instead of trading back and trying to use that to get other picks and still get a guy that we like later?
Yeah, exactly. And they've found themselves. I kind of look at this draft as like the Steelers are learning from their past mistakes. And you could go back like Terrell Edmonds draft. They were clearly looking for a safety. They've made that known. Artie Burns. Like there have been times very recently where the Steelers have locked themselves into a position and it has come back to not work out for them. This year might be a look at when TJ was on the board. He was the best guy on the board by a mile, and we had to take him. And they have to look at this is not a loaded draft. I mean, there are a lot of really, really, really good players, but it feels like the first round is not. It's not what it typically is. Those first couple of guys are very elite, but then there's a lot of like question marks in that mid to late round of the first, or mid to late section of the first round. You got to be able to walk out of there with a first round talent, like a true first round talent. And I wouldn't be surprised if they're looking at it going, all right, there's two safeties that meet that bill. Might as well look into them.
Absolutely. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, it's time for our Mock Draft Monday winner. Noah and I go over all the different – I went over all the picks, but I want to go over the winner that I thought for this week won the Mock Draft Monday contest. Keep it here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Chris Carter, Noah Strackbein. We'll be right back. But first, I want to remind you this show is also brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all the money go? Between dining out, online shopping, entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track your spending, and even plan long-term goals. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year at Monarch Money. We're back here in the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, here with Noah Strackbein of All Steelers Talk. Noah, as always, we do a Mock Draft Monday segment where we allow fans. I post over the weekend on my Twitter, my Blue Sky, or my Facebook. Your chance, you post a screenshot of your mock draft. Just follow the rules that I post, and I'll consider you and look at your draft picks, and we'll go over your picks for a chance to get them on the show. This week's rule, Noah, was they had to get a second round pick somehow. You could trade back in the first. You could trade up from the third. You could do something, but you had to do it some way, somehow, get a second round pick back in the fold this year, and how you do it. And I left it open to that because I wanted to see, would people give up the first round pick entirely to get a second round pick and then more ammunition? Would they trade back in the first and get a second? Would they trade up from the third and give up other assets to get that second round pick? I even left it out there that you could trade a player. No one did that though. Everyone kind of kept it because I was like, I wanted to see who would be really nasty with I didn't get one George Pickens, Minka Fitzpatrick, TJ Watt type of trade.
What?
And I was like, right? I thought some of y'all would be crazy, but I'm glad you weren't, because some of y'all be tripping.
No, yeah, but pro player all day, every day. That's the Pittsburgh Steelers fan base always. So why would anybody else go? I'll say this: TJ for a second round pick, awful trade.
Yeah, be terrible. But
that'd be the worst trade possible.
That's what I'm saying. I'm glad y'all didn't do that. But I was shocked because sometimes I get some of those and I'm just like, yeah, skip. I'm not considering that one. But we had several good ones. We always do every week. And I want to shout out to this one from our Locked On Steelers Facebook group. This one comes from Brian Kearney. Congratulations. You won this week's Mock Draft Monday picks. Now, I think it's interesting because of the way that he went about it here, Noah. He did trade back in the first round, but he traded back with the Philadelphia Eagles, getting their second round pick, giving up the Steelers' third round pick. So essentially, they traded traded back in the first, up from the third to the second. But what he also did here was he picked up their second round pick. I don't know if the Eagles would be able to would be willing to give up that high of a price for that kind of a trade-off. But the idea of adding picks at all for next year with any trade back does intrigue me, considering, Noah, the whole comp pick theory idea that the Steelers are loading up because next year is their quarterback year.
Yeah, next year is their quarterback year. Let's be
I think so too.
And I think that's what's really nice about this mock draft is that they go out there and get Tyler Shuck. That you're looking at going, there it is. There's the guy that they want to compete with next year's dude that they go all in on. And to get a second round pick in the process, and that's a win-win. Would it happen? I don't know. Howie Roseman, Omar Khan, I think they are both the con artists of the NFL right now. So that would be a little tricky, but I don't hate it. And when it comes to the idea of getting it for next year, stacking for next year, and getting quarterbacks this year that you think have upside, I mean, that's a great move. I'm a big fan of stacking up for the quarterback position and the way that he went about it in this one.
Absolutely. And let's look at all the picks here that he had lined up that Brian put here. Kenneth Grant at 32 overall. I don't know if Kenneth Grant falls that far, but there are some people, Noah, that have him low on their big board because they feel like he's a pure nose and they feel like there's not a place for that in today's NFL. I'm telling you, if the Steelers see him and if somehow Grant, Nolen, and Harmon are all sitting there at 21, I do think that's when the Steelers are like, you know what? Let's trade back because we want one of these three guys, unless they feel like one of them is the guy and they're like, we can't let this guy slip through our fingers. But that might be the situation where you trade back and say, hey, if one of these three guys falls further, we'll be happy and we'll get some extra compensation from this. I don't think Kenneth Grant falls this far, Noah, but again, like if you were to trade back and still get him, I think that would be a home run opportunity for the Steelers.
Yeah, I mean, that's the steal of the first round if Kenneth Grant goes 32nd. That is such a massive pick for the Steelers at 32, and it would be ideal. That's ideal for the Steelers right now, is to be able to move back, have options, get that second round pick back, maybe more, and then still select somebody that we're mocking them at 21, and to be able to do that. And I think they're going to have options. If it's Kenneth Grant, that is the option. That's top tier. That's the option.
Hey, Cam Hayward was a 31st overall pick, so maybe we're not so. Maybe Brian's not so crazy here. But his second round pick here, he went and got his wide receiver Jaden Higgins, and I don't know about you, Noah. I love Jaden Higgins measurables. Him and Darian Porter, the two Iowa State guys. One Higgins, the wide receiver, Porter, the corner. Their measurables are insane this year. If they were to get either one of those guys with that second round pick, to me, that wide receiver, corner, two positions of need, I think, in this year's draft class.
Yes.
If they got them, one, you put Higgins in this offense with Pickens and Metcalf, that's a dangerous wide receiver situation.
Yes, especially with Calvin Austin. Like you've added plenty of speed, you've got the size. Obviously, you like that's what you're looking for. The Steelers last year, obviously, like the Van Jefferson being wide receiver 2 thing was its own mess. But if you just dissected it of like what they needed to add, it's speed. They need speed and guys that can make big plays. And that's what you're getting here. And I think that adding him with DK Metcalf, with George Pickens, who are both physical freaks who could also catch the ball and take it 60, Calvin Austin, who's just electric. I mean, you just added a ton of speed. I like a wide receiver in the second round. I think that works really well for the Steelers. I don't know what the plans are for George Pickens long-term, but I do know that preparing for the worst is always a good idea in the NFL. I love that pick in the second round.
Absolutely. Here we'll run through these other picks now. Because of the trade, the Steelers don't have a third round pick here. This is also where I don't know if Omar Khan would go for this part, because they like to have picks in each of the rounds, and that is a big gap to go from 64 all the way to the fourth round at 123. But like you said, Tyler Shuck, fourth round quarterback. I think that he's a solid day 3 pick. The people I want to ask you this, Noah. Are you a Tyler Shuck in the second or third round guy, or do you? I have an opinion that if your name isn't Shedeur Sanders,
yes,
I don't care about you in the second or third round. Jalen Milroe in the third round, I think it's fine. Everyone after Milroe and Sanders, you are day 3 at best, and I am not reaching for that.
I 100% agree. I am so against this quarterback draft class as a whole. And I'm just looking at it going, unless you have a ton of upside with Shedeur Sanders, Jalen Milroe, ton of upside. Question marks, obviously, but a ton. And, Shedeur, way less question marks than Jalen Milroe, but so much upside. And if that's what you're going to do, awesome. That's what you do in the second and third round at quarterback, because you take a chance. But you're not taking a chance. Like Quinn Ewers, Will Howard, Riley Leonard, even Tyler Shuck in the 4th round is a steal, but in the 2nd or 3rd, nope. Like the upside's just not there for me to say these guys are going to be Hall of Fame quarterbacks. You know, Jalen Milroe and Shedeur Sanders are guys that in 5 years, if they turned into Lamar Jackson, and I don't even know what a good pocket quarterback would be these days, like Shedeur Sanders would be, but somebody like that, it would not surprise any of us. We'd all be sitting around going, yeah, saw that coming into the draft.
And so that's where I have that's why I'm just not on board with the Steelers going that early. He rounds it out. Devin Neal, the running back out of Kansas at 156, offensive tackle Jalen Rivers out of Miami at 185, and then Desir Stackhouse, 7th round defensive tackle out of Georgia. But of course, also getting that 2nd round pick from the Eagles is big there. Yeah, and again, Noah, looking at this, Devin Neal was an interesting running back going into the combine, and then he didn't run a great 40-yard dash time, despite his tape looked like he played very fast, and so I think that created some hesitancy. But I'd be intrigued at waiting for like a 5th round pick to get him, because to me, I think the sweet spot for running back is that 3rd and 4th round pick there, which is why it's really tricky with what position you want to go with there. Like going for wide receiver in round 2, I'm not mad at that, but then if you don't get your running back in the 4th round, you're pushing that off, and now you are putting yourself in a position where you better have another big hit at running back in the later part of the draft. Otherwise, Jaylen Warren and Kenneth Gainwell just might be your guys, and this guy's going to end up just sitting on the bench for most of the year.
Yeah, and I think that Jaylen Warren and Kenneth Gainwell are fine unless somebody gets hurt, and then they're not fine anymore. And right, because they're both guys that need to split time. And I have all the faith in the world with Jaylen Warren as a starting running back, but he's also 5'5", you know what I mean? And at some point that's running a risk. Devin Neal, I like Devin Neal. I think I'm trying really hard not to fault him for that 40 time, because I do think that he plays really fast. And I think that he's got a bunch of explosiveness in his game, and I'm not really concerned about it. Like, you watch him on the field outrun guys and you go, all right, well, that's, there it is. That's the speed that we're looking for. But I also think there are other names there that, just like you said, 3rd, 4th, 5th round is the sweet spot. I think guys are going to fall. I think Ashton Genty is going to be the guy. And then depending on when Omarion Hampton goes, that's when the rest of the cards start to fall, because you're going to look at that first domino and everybody's going to play chicken with it and say, I need a running back, but there are so many. I'll wait it out. And if they end up where Trey Hendrickson, Caleb Johnson somehow make it to the 3rd round, that's massive. Yes. After that, Damian Martinez, Devin Neal, all in the Dylan Sampson, I think, is really underrated in this draft.
I agree.
As those 4th, 5th, 6th round guys, you could still get a guy that's a contributor. And I think that's Devin Neal is certainly in that group.
Absolutely. Noah, thank you so much for joining us here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Let people they can find you, follow you, and get more of your work.
Yes, sir. You can follow me on X, Blue Sky, wherever at Noah Strackbein. Check out the podcast, at All Steelers Talk, youtube.com/All Steelers Talk. And you can find all my work at si.com/NFL/Steelers.
Absolutely. He's Noah Strackbein. Noah, thanks for joining us. Thank you all for joining us here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Shout out to our Mock Draft Monday winner again, Brian Kearney. Remember, we do this all the way up to the draft. So we only got a few more of these. So be sure to pay attention over the weekends when I'm posting those Mock Draft Monday posts to get your chance to get on the show. We got more to hear on the Steelers tomorrow here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Follow me on Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky, all the social medias, TikTok, at Carter Critiques, same handle everywhere. You can also read my work in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, post-gazette.com. Find me here on the Locked On Steelers podcast Monday through Friday. We'll be back here with an episode tomorrow here on the Locked On Steelers podcast.